Welcome everyone to today's program. I'm Shannon Barnett with Becker's Hospital Review. The program will begin with a presentation, and we will have a question and answer session following completion of the presentation. You can submit any questions you have throughout the presentation by typing them into the control panel in the space labeled Enter Question for Staff and clicking Send. Our presenters will attempt to answer as many questions as they can during this time. You will receive an email within a week following the webinar that will include instructions for how you can download a copy of the presentation. You will also receive a follow-up email shortly after completion of the program. You can submit your feedback or any additional questions at that time. This email will not include the presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Adam Klass, Chief Technology Officer, is responsible for the architecture and development of large-scale data-driven applications, including Vigilant's Enterprise Intelligence Resource Platform, which incorporates services-oriented architecture and open application program interface capability, API, to aggregate and interact with disparate data across any healthcare enterprise. Adam holds a BA in Political Science from the University of Kansas, as well as an MA in Public Administration from the University of Illinois in Chicago. Bart Aben, Chief Data Scientist, leads the data science team in building customizable statistical and predictive models that are fully integrated into the Vigilant Intelligence Platform. He holds an MS in Mathematics from Georgia State University and a PhD in Health Services Research from the University of Minnesota, and has extensive experience in optimization, discrete event stimulation, and data modeling. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Adam to begin today's presentation.
Hi, and thank you so much for your time today. Very much appreciated. I'm going to start a little bit, if we go over to our first slide here, just giving you a little bit of background about Vigilant. So Vigilant has been around since 2001. We are a software as a service, meaning that our hospitals and health systems don't have to purchase any hardware or software in order to use our services. And we've really been focused in the area of real-time surveillance for many years now. We have nearly 400 hospitals around the country that are using our services. Our longest running system has been running for almost 12 years now, so we've been in this space for a long time and really have been focused on real-time surveillance, and as you'll hear today, really getting into the area of predictive analytics as well. We have offices in Minneapolis and Chicago, and Gartner named Vigilant as a cool vendor in healthcare in 2015. And really our passion here is to deliver real-time information and insights that healthcare executives and clinicians need to improve patient care and operational performance. Next slide, please. So what we've designed here is what we call our Enterprise Intelligence Resources Platform. And really what Vigilant provides is really a layer that sits on top of your electronic medical record and really derives all of that value of that data that's within the system to really be able to handle clinical situations in real time. So if we start down here at the bottom of this diagram, we're listening or pulling information from the electronic medical record. We've worked with all the major EMRs out there, whether it's Epic, Cerner, McKesson, Meditech, or Allscripts. And what we're doing is we're listening for this information in real time. And what we're doing with that information as it's coming into us is we're standardizing and normalizing that data. So getting this information, getting it into a relational data model so we can start to ask interesting questions of this data. And then what Vigilant is it's designed event-based rules engines really to be able to ask any question that a clinician may want to have answered within real time. So the more data feeds that come into the platform, the more types of scenarios that we can follow for our thousands of users around the country that are using our services. Several times a day we're taking this information that's within our transactional database and we're rolling this all up into an enterprise data warehouse, which is allowing for analytics and reporting across our systems. It also ties in very well with the predictive analytics platform that we have available as well. Vigilant is also doing a lot in the area of interoperability services. So our users have a very extensive workflow that they access using single sign-on, going through a secure web portal. What we were also doing at Vigilant is we're building out smart applications, so getting this extremely important workflow for our clinicians back into the EMR, back into other systems so they can be within one system and still derive the value that they need out of the Vigilant platform. Vigilance provides services in the area of pharmacy, antimicrobial stewardship and infection control, quality reporting and care management, Temporal Ethics, our predictive analytics platform, which we'll be talking about, as well as advisory services. Next slide, please. So the real value of this platform is really to have really an intelligence platform that really addresses so many key issues within healthcare. So next piece of the slide, please. So if you think about care management, the services that Vigilance provides there. So if you think about pharmacy, being able to identify and prevent adverse drug events in real time, so be able to track any drug in your formulary related to any lab test result. Being able to do so on an exception basis, so really allowing your best practices at the hospital to drive how the rule engine behaves, and then only being alerted when you're not following your own guidance. Taking all of the things that you're doing within your antimicrobial stewardship program today and really getting that down to a rule set so you're able to be alerted to your patients in real time for these scenarios, whether it's drug-bug mismatch or de-escalation opportunities or duration of therapy. All of these things are rules that can sit within the Vigilance engine to alert you in real time. Sepsis surveillance, which we'll certainly be focused on here today, whether it's DVT prevention or glycemic control or falls prevention. We're doing some very interesting things with ZINCs. So we're taking ZINC's vital intervention, so their evidence-based content. We're taking that content and actually building it into Vigilance rules, which just take a few minutes to put together. So you can also have evidence-based content delivered to you in real time, doing a lot of work around medication reconciliation, as well as infection control, so real-time surveillance for suspected isolation candidates or reportables for your state, suspected healthcare-associated infections, and really a whole set of tools in our toolbox for the infection preventionists to really focus on prevention. Next, please. We're also doing a lot in the area of regulatory management as well. So if you think about reporting to the National Health Safety Network through this EIR platform, you're able to directly submit information to the National Health Safety Network, whether it's for infection control for things like surgical site infections, or whether it's for pharmacy, doing things around antimicrobial usage reporting. We're doing a tremendous amount of work around quality reporting, utilization of drugs, specifically around antimicrobial usage as well as safety and risk management. Next, please. This also falls in the area of operations management as well, so safety and risk management, again, readmissions prevention, medication cost management, core measure surveillance. Many of our hospitals are tracking core measures in real time, and then they're able to aggregate that data and look at those results and doing things around quality indicators, surveillance as well. Next, please. And then also a tremendous opportunities within research. So as this information is coming into our platform, anything that's coming into us, anything we're generating with our real-time rules engines or anything that's being entered into the system can be fully reported and mined out of the system, and it's never purged. So we really have a real-time enterprise data warehouse that's getting generated several times a day. We also have the ability with our rule sets to run seamlessly in the background, so researchers can be tracking pieces of information in real time for aggregation that they can then use for their own study. Next, please. And then also doing a lot in the area of population health, whether it's risk stratification, looking at chronic disease management or episodic care optimization, and then certainly doing quite a bit around preventative health as well with our real-time surveillance. Next, please. And then in the area of public health, so really being able to roll all of this information together and look at things like infectious diseases, and we're doing a lot with our hospitals around syndromic surveillance as well. Next. So Becker's recently did a survey of healthcare CIOs and the biggest challenges that they're facing in 2016. And of the 6, these 2 really focus on what is critical in improving and optimizing patient care and is necessary for clinical and predictive analytics. So first of all, managing massive amounts of data. So you really need to know how to create the right action insights from the deluge of data and really knowing where to look. A survey noted that 51% of healthcare leaders believe that the most significant barrier to hospital data analytics is not knowing what data to collect or how much of it to mine. And efficient data analytics are linked to significantly reduce cost, increase business intelligence, and improve clinical outcomes. And then really being able to embrace the care continuing. So as in reimbursement is linked to value, clinical outcomes data are more intertwined with the revenue cycle. And then really anywhere intelligence to make informed decisions. So really the ability to have this data available and actionable anywhere within the healthcare setting. Next, please.
Thank you, Adam. So this is Bart. And so today we're going to use sepsis prediction as a great example of what the Vigilance platform can deliver in terms of advanced analytics. And sepsis is on the lips of everyone. We know how insidious it is in the hospital, has one of the highest mortality risks of any kind of disease or infection you might get in the hospital. Some estimates put the cost of sepsis at about $29 billion annually. And so, I mean, there is a lot of opportunity with sepsis in terms of saving lives and cost reduction. But before we even go into the details of our sepsis predictive model, I'd like to talk a little bit about our unique platform and some of the analytics we're able to do with that. Next, please. So we've coined the term Temporal Ethics methodology, and it's a unique approach that we have with our platform. And with the platform that Adam just talked about and all the various services that we have on that platform, from pharmacy to antimicrobial stewardship to infection control to care management, as users interact with this system, we are able to collect tons and tons of data around all the events that those rules have been built from, as well as the timestamps that are associated with all those events and the user interaction with the system. So with that unique data set, we're able to paint a picture of the response times around any particular event that is of interest to you. And so we're able to paint a whole, we are able to see the variability around response times to any particular event. And with that, we can paint a behavioral picture of your users around that event. And this is very, very unique to Vigilance. It is made possible because of the timestamps and the metadata that we're able to collect. So if you take, for example, one rule that is run by several of our clients, which is the antibiotic bug mismatch rule, where we're looking for instances where a patient is on an antibiotic that eventually ends up being not good for the bug. Once we get the culture coming back and we realize that the antibiotic the patient is on is not the right antibiotic, the rule then lies in wait and will send an alert if after some good medical practice interval, we don't see a switch of that antibiotic. So over time, we're able to tell how long it took for that antibiotic switch to be made. And then we can run some great analysis around that. We can do some outcome analysis. We can, for example, look at how that delay in response time might have affected length of stay, or maybe a transfer to an intensive care unit. And this is very unique to Vigilance. Now, beyond our temporal ethics methodology, we have an embedded predictive tools in our platform that leverages some of the most advanced machine learning algorithms. Now, what we realize that a lot of the time in most clinical care settings, the scores and algorithms that we've seen being used are sometimes quite simple and incorporate just a few elements. And I think that is deliberate because you want the clinician to be able to compute that score at the bedside and do the triaging that is required. But when you search the literature, there are so many advanced algorithms that can be leveraged. Unfortunately, it's not easy to bring that to the bedside. You know, healthcare institutions face a few challenges when it comes to leveraging advanced analytics. I would say 3 of those challenges are the lack of embedded predictive tools within the care delivery application. If you take EMRs, for example, they are great in as data repositories. They're also great in providing you with a user interface that you need to care for the patient. But they are not inherently predictive analytics tools, so they can provide you with those advanced algorithms that you need to make better use of the data that is residing within that EMR or EHR system. With Vigilance, our platform has a fully integrated predictive modeling tools, and these tools can ingest historical data as well as real-time data. So if you take a patient in the hospital, we can take the historical data around the patient 2, 3 years, 5 years. We know what infection that patient has had, what surgeries that patient has had. We know all their comorbidities, as well as combining those historical data points with the real-time data that we are now receiving from that patient. So together you can create great predictive algorithms which work far better than the simplistic ones that we often see. Now, a second challenge that faces healthcare settings is that most of the time third-party vendors would sell you black box models. You don't know the underlying assumptions that are going on in that model. We don't know whether that model is going to work very well for your population. And even when the science improves and we have new knowledge, it's difficult to update those models. The way Vigilance approaches our predictive models is that we work collaboratively with our partner institutions. We work with your institution, we work with your own clinicians to develop some of the assumptions around the model. And I think this is very, very important because it fosters the adoption of those models. We spoke recently to one client of ours, and they bemoaned the fact that although they've made some investments in some cutting-edge applications, they are finding it very difficult to have their clinicians adopt those models and those applications. So we work as partners with your clinicians and make sure that they have input into the model that we develop. And by so doing, it allows them to, to adopt those models a lot more easily than models that don't understand what the underlying assumptions are. Now, again, because of the way our platform is, it makes it very easy for us to update our models. If the science improves and there is new knowledge out there and we need to update those models to incorporate that new knowledge, it is very easy for us to do that. Now, a third challenge that faces healthcare institutions as they try to adopt advanced analytics is that they may have access to third-party models that may work very well with them. But then how do you bring those models into the workflow and integrate it into the clinician's workflow for them to use it? What we do is that for all our predictive models, we have built comprehensive workflows around them. Now, if we even go beyond that, in that we are working on smart on fire applications, which leverages the HL7 standards to now bring those workflows within your typical EHR or EMR workbench. Next slide, please. So here on this slide, we have a very simplistic view of the timeline of a patient that is on admission in the hospital. And that patient may go on to become septic or not. Now, so using the historical data that we have, clinical historical data, what we do is that we build a cohort of that patient population. And so for each patient, we can identify whether that patient had sepsis or not during their stay in the hospital. Beyond that, because of the temporal ethics approach that I talked about earlier and the time metadata that we have, we can pinpoint what time during the patient's stay that sepsis occurred. And I think this is very key to this modeling approach, because in trying to predict who would get sepsis and preempt that, you want to use only inputs that were collected before the onset of sepsis. And we can do that. If you are to build this model from administrative data and you don't have those timestamps, you're going to have a very hard time in really focusing on inputs that were collected before the presentation of severe sepsis. Now, once we tag the patients as such, we can build a cohort with which we will train our predictive model. So then we apply the standard principles in predictive modeling. We break the data into 2 or 3 parts. We use one part to train the model. And then once the model has been optimized, we run that model against the data that was not seen by the model to make sure that we are achieving the sensitivities and the specificities that we would like to see. Now, with sepsis, for a long time, the standard approach has been what is called the SERS criteria, which is the 2 out of 4 different elements. If they are met by the patient, you tag that patient and you begin to follow that patient and try to intervene. Now, we go beyond that. Because of our data repository, we're able to take the patient's age, we are able to take BMI, we're able to take the complete history of that patient, all the comorbidities we have for that patient, together with the real-time data that is flowing, the vitals, the labs, the cultures, and then use that in a predictive model to identify patients who would get severe sepsis. Next slide, please. So what we did here was that we compared the outcomes from our model against the SERS criteria approach. Now, on the left side of this screen, we have the SERS model, and this is the SERS2+. That means when 2 or more of the SERS items, the SERS criteria are met. To the right, we have our Temporal Ethics model. Now, off the bat, we see that the sensitivity of the SERS model is pretty good. It's 87%. And it's not surprising because the SERS criteria is pretty liberal in that most patients in the hospital are going to meet that criteria. On the downside, it gives us relatively low specificity of 73%. Now, with our model, we see that we actually improve upon that sensitivity to 89%. But then the key is the specificity is 90%. And this is telling in that we are going to reduce the number of false positives here. So on the left side, we see that there are 730 patients in the middle top row who did not end up becoming septic, but the SERS2+ model says that they are positive. So those are patients that you're going to devote time, effort, and likely treat them, but otherwise they wouldn't be septic. Now, when you compare it to our model to the right, that number reduces drastically to 274 patients. And these are patients that that would avoid all kinds of issues that they otherwise didn't need. Next slide, please. So what we did was to do a very simple cost-benefit analysis with these numbers. And these numbers are coming from a real institution looking at one month's data. And with this cost-benefit analysis, we stretched this over 1 year to see what savings we could get with our model. So here we're looking at a sensitivity of 6%, meaning that out of the total admits, 6% of the population would end up being septic. So that's an incidence of 6%, not sensitivity. Now we are looking at the total number of patients over the course of the year, 27,818. Now, we made some very conservative assumptions here. We assume that the cost per case of severe sepsis is 19,000, which is on the low side. Some analysis that came from the healthcare utilization projects pegs that number from anywhere from 18,000 to 33,000. And we assume that the cost per averted severe sepsis, that is the cases that are predicted earlier because of our model, would be 11,000. That's a savings of about 8,000 over the full-blown sepsis. And we assume that the cost per false positives, all those patients who are triggered positive but otherwise wouldn't have been septic, was $1,000. And we assume that the interventions that you do are going to be 80% effective. Now, if we do this and we compare these two models, our model versus the standard series approach, at $19,000 per case, we are looking at a savings of over $4 million with our model versus the series model. Now, if we slide to the right side of the cost per case to around $24,000, we are looking at a savings of about $5 million annually when you go with our model. Now, these are just the monetary savings. Again, there are other issues that you may not be able to measure in terms of dollars. These are all, talking about patients who would otherwise not become septic, but you end up maybe providing some form of intervention and all the risks that those patients might have to endure. So the box to the right indicates that with the vigilance model, you are following a case load of 415 versus the series criteria model where you're looking at 869 per month for this particular data set that we look at. So there are huge savings with the vigilance model, many of them that you cannot quantify. Again, these analyses were based on administrative data. Now, there are probably outcomes that were not captured by the administrative data, which are not reflected in this model. The other thing of note too is that our model is a predictive model. What the model attempts to do is to preempt the onset of sepsis. So unlike this series model where you are looking at the identification of sepsis, here there are opportunities to intervene way earlier in the process. And there are so many nuances here that you cannot necessarily capture in dollar terms. So this is where I will hand it over to Adam to see how this all integrates into our platform.
Thanks, Bart. Yeah, so this slide is sepsis predictive intelligence integration, and really what our platform is really built for and allows for is really a real-time continuous learning model. So as we're listening for this information coming out of the electronic health record, and as we're standardizing and normalizing that data, and this is happening 24/7 every few minutes, what we're also able to do is we're able to run our real-time event-based rules engine, providing exception-based guidance to run against the data, and addressing some of the real key issues in healthcare, as I mentioned, whether we're looking at things around services around pharmacy or infection control or antimicrobial stewardship. And certainly, along with that, a really important set of rules that are looking for some key sepsis indicators. And then what we're able to do in real time is we're able to take all of this information, so all of the data that's coming in on the patient, all of their historical data, as well as the metadata results from the rules engine, and we're able to pass that over into the machine learning model. And then out of the machine learning model, we're able to return back a score, and that score is coming back, getting directly into the workflow, and then combining that with all of the other real key data elements that a clinician would want to be seeing as they're looking at a set of patients that may be septic or becoming septic, and really looking what's around the corner. It really displays all that information right in front of the clinician to be able to really do something with that information and take action. And then what we're also providing on the analytics side is the ability to roll all of this information up and then look retrospectively at those results. Next slide. So this is an example of a smart application. So this is a sepsis work list that sits within our Vigilance secure web portal. But this has also been designed as a smart application, meaning this can actually be embedded directly within the EMR, so the clinicians are able to go directly to this screen without having to go to a different system. So they're able to see right away what the risk score is, and they're able to graph that immediately, who the patient is, down to the location, room. And then they've got all the key indicators that they'd really want to be looking for, and the ability to graph this information on the fly as it's happening. I should mention as well that with these rules and even looking at the score itself, all this information can be email, paged, or texted out as well, so we're immediately reaching out to the clinician to let them know there's an issue without them even having to come into a workflow. And I'll pass this back over to Bart.
Thank you, Adam. Next slide, please. Now, the Vigilance platform, again, with our metadata, allows you to do many interesting things. Now, in our work with our clients in developing this sepsis model, one of the very first things we did was to look at all the data inputs that were needed for the model and do some analysis around it. One of the things that was of interest to us was that once vital signs are collected on the floor by clinicians, how soon is that data available within the EMR for us to use it? Now, we take for granted that if the data hit the EMR and we have access to it, that is real time in our hands. But then there are some situations where we realize that there was a bottleneck between the time the data is collected in the hospital before that data actually is uploaded into the EMR. That is, if the systems and the devices that are collecting those vital signs are not directly, they don't have a direct link to the EMR. There's some interesting analysis, and we realized that for this particular client, there were delays of up to an hour and a half when the data gets collected from the patient and to the time that the data actually gets into the EMR to be consumed by all the analytics that reside in the EMR or on top of the EMR. And we are able to do that analysis again because of the time metadata that we have. We have the time stamp that it tells exactly when that device, would be the thermometer or something that collects the blood pressure. We have a time stamp as to when that piece of data actually got collected and when that data also got into the database. And that simple analysis was able to, with that simple analysis, the client was able to do some process changes to ensure that that data actually hits the EMR on time. We also went on further to do some turnaround analysis around when labs audit and when the labs actually, the results come back. Again, we could cut that analysis by various units, by various times of the day, hours of the day, and so on and so forth, even days of the week. And we were able to identify which times or days of the week we have long turnaround times. And so some process changes were institutionalized to to fix those problems. And there are many of such simple analysis, operational analysis that can have tremendous, improvements in processes in the hospital that with our platform we're able to do. Next slide, please. So, Adam, maybe you can pick it up from here.
Sure. So we've been very focused on sepsis, but our data science team is really expanding this into all of these different areas. And the real beauty of the platform is as long as that data is flowing into the platform, using the process we have, using the machine learning models that we're able to access in real time. There's so many other areas that we can focus on, whether it's glycemic control or readmissions, or C. diff or stroke or MRSA, and we're really starting to analyze and build out those areas as well for our hospitals around the country. I think that's our last slide.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bart and Adam, for a very informative and noble presentation. Everyone, we will now begin the Q&A portion of the program. Just as a quick reminder, you can submit any questions you have by typing them into the control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. And just like, don't be shy about it. Our presenters will attempt to answer any questions as they can during the time we have for this Q&A. So go ahead and see here what questions we have. Great. The first one we have is, do you build drivers to receive data from all medical devices, such as vents, pumps, things of that nature?
Yes, I can speak to that. So really the way we've designed the platform is any bit of data from the healthcare system can flow into it, whether we're listening for that information or we also have the capabilities of being able to go and get that information. So and specifically to those data elements, yes, we are bringing that information into our platform today for many of our hospitals around the country.
Great, thanks, Adam.
Sure.
Another question we have is, one of the audience members wants to know, is this model built to predict all severities of sepsis or particularly for severe sepsis or septic shock?
Well, yeah, I can take this. So this model we built was specifically designed to predict the onset of organ dysfunction, which we would call severe sepsis, although we know that the vocabulary around sepsis keeps changing. And this is the beauty of working with us, in that we can actually build a model, customize the model to what you really want to achieve. And we recognize that sepsis is a little bit, the term can be nebulous, the endpoints can be nebulous. For example, if you take the recent third consensus definition that came from, that was published in JAMA in January, in that paper, they tested 4 models, and the way they defined the endpoint was a patient who has infection and stayed in the ICU for 3 or more days or died. So that was the defined endpoint. Now, you may be interested in a different endpoint. You may be probably interested in predicting septic shock for patients who already are in the ICU. We can work with you to build that model, because this is a very, very customized approach, and we work with you to identify what you want to see and build that model for you. So yes, we can do that. We can actually have a battery of models running, one looking for the onset of organ dysfunction, one that's looking for septic shock in patients who already have severe sepsis. That is, we can do that.
Wonderful. Bart, another question for you. For our audience members who are concerned about the mortality of sepsis, does the model also give the predicted mortality for the condition?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think this is in line with what I just discussed, in that if mortality is one of interest to you, we can build a customized model to look specifically for that. And I think that is very important, because we know that there are several scores out there and algorithms out there that tend to predict almost everything. We leverage it to look at 1-year mortality, you look at 30-day mortality. And at the same time, those algorithms are being leveraged to predict mortality around in-hospital mortality. Obviously, that single model will not be optimal for all these scenarios. So what we say is that if you want a specific outcome, let us develop the model for that specific outcome, optimize it, test it against historical data, and be sure that it works. So if we want to design a model that predicts mortality in patients who already have sepsis, it is very easy for us to do that. We can do that with the data that we have.
Great, great. Adam, I'm going to direct this question to you. Does Vigilance rely on all the medical device vendors to link to the EMR, or can you take their data and alarm outputs directly into the engine and put that directly into the engine?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be through the EMR. We generally listen for HL7 outbound messages, but we do have hospitals where we're not necessarily going through the EMR because there's some scrubbing and filtering of that data that they're interested in getting that directly into Vigilant. So it can go through the EHR, or we can work on connectivity with an agreed upon data format and frequency directly with the vendor as well.
Wonderful, very helpful. For either of our speakers, do you support output protocols to any vendors that would be able to effectively alert clinicians of potential sepsis alarms on smartphones?
Yeah, so the way that we've designed the platform and the way that the rules engines are set up is we also have a notification engine. So there's multiple ways of getting the output from the rules engines. One is you'll have a secure login to the Vigilance web portal. You'll be able to pull up all this information. We have our smart applications, which you can embed into the EMR, and then you can also do a couple of things. You can set up what are called notification templates that actually attach to the rules. So if you want a group of people to be notified when that particular rule triggers, you're able to do that. And then also the individual users themselves can subscribe to rules. So if there's a set of rules that they want to be alerted to immediately, they can have that go to email, page, or text. You can specify which days you want that to go out, times of day, even the specific location as well. So there's a lot of customization and a lot of different options for sending this information around.
Wonderful. Another question about the solution: is it vendor neutral with regards to interfacing with EMRs?
It is. So we've worked with all the major EMR vendors, whether it's Epic or Cerner or Allscripts or McKesson or Meditech. We're also working with vendors that maybe aren't as prevalent in hospitals. We've worked with proprietary systems as well. So it's really just getting the mechanism for sending the data over, which is generally HL7. And then we can work with any version of HL7 in order to ingest that into the platform. So, but we can work with any vendor that can meet those requirements. So.
Great. So it sounds very flexible. Another question along those lines: do you need any IT current platform to connect with the system, or are there any other requirements that a hospital would meet or a provider would have to meet to connect to the system?
Yeah, so what we do is, we're a true software as a service. So Vigilance fully supports and maintains the services. We have full-time clinicians on staff, so as clinicians within the hospital are needing help within the system, they're working directly with Vigilance clinicians who have at least 10 years of experience working in the acute care setting. What we do with our hospitals is we just set up a secure connection between the data centers, which is called a VPN, and that's how the information flows over. And the hospital doesn't have to buy any hardware or software in order to use our services. So we really try to keep this IT light. We get the connection established. We work with the IT folks in order to get the data flowing over to us, or give us the mechanism for going and getting the data. And then it's really up to Vigilance on our side to support and maintain and get the hospital up and running. And it's also, I should mention, a very rapid implementation. It's actually a 90 business day implementation from the time that we've got all the pieces in place and we're getting your live data and it's meeting our requirements. So this isn't a platform that's going to take you months or years to get up and running. This is something that gets up and running very quickly, and you can immediately start to get results out of the system.
Got it. Wonderful. Let's see here. We have another question from the audience. They want to know if Vigilance reports to the National Healthcare Safety Network, AUR.
We do, absolutely. So actually, Vigilance is, as far as we know, is the only vendor in the country that has what's called direct submission. So what that means is within Vigilance, whether you're doing a AUR submission, which we absolutely do, we're doing that for several hospitals. We just need your drug administration data to be sent to us. That's a requirement for antibiotic usage reporting. Directly from Vigilance, as you're in our portal, you're able to pull up that data and directly submit it to National Health Safety Network. So what's really nice about that is you don't have to download and upload files and switch systems. It's all done within Vigilance, and then we've got a secure HISP connection that goes over to the National Health Safety Network. So it's very heavily used by our hospitals.
Wonderful, great. We have another question. Let's see. Does predictive data permanently reside in each patient's EHR so that it can be referenced to for future hospital admissions?
And I can take some of that. I don't know, Bart, if you wanted to talk too. But the other thing that we do within this platform is we don't purge any of this data. So for example, our hospital that's been running for 12 years, they've actually have 12 years worth of data that they're able to mine out of the system, that we're able to do predictive analytics off of, that we're able to tie into our machine learning models, and that they're able to report out. So it's not that we're not just retaining a year or two worth of data. It's really all of that data is always available in multitudes of ways.
Got it. Bart, could you talk a little more about that archive data?
Well, yeah, I think with the predictive model in itself, those models are running real time, so they get updated. The scores get updated every few minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, and so the scores for an individual might change or not change. What we do is that when the scores, every time the score gets updated, we save the previous score. So we have a full history of that data. And depending on the client and what they want to do with it, we can purge it or not purge it. But I think the vigilance policy is that we don't throw data away. We store that data for future research.
Great. Thank you. Another question, do you also have any API integrations, or is it just HL7?
As far as being able to get and receive data? Is that the? Can you repeat the question real quick?
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't have to be. Yeah. So we have a couple of things. So HL7 is really the main standard out there that we work with. We really any mechanism for getting the data into Vigilance. We even bring things in as flat files where HL7 isn't available. We do that quite a bit. So the hospital will generate a flat file for us every 30 minutes, every hour. Ideally, you want to get this as real time as possible. So if it's available as HL7, we'll take it that way. We also have a services-oriented architecture on our side as part of this platform. So if other organizations want to be able to securely come in and use our services in order to pull data out of the system, that's a way for us to share data through our APIs that we have as well.
Got it. Question going a little bit back to the issue of archiving data and then just how the module works in general. Can you address some of the issues regarding privacy?
Well, I can talk a little bit to that. Privacy can mean a lot of different things. But from a security perspective, all of our hospitals are running out of our. We've got 2 data centers. We've got a production data center, a disaster recovery site. The security controls that we have built on top of that are extremely robust. All the data is encrypted at rest. We have policy controls and policies and access controls and we have security audits and web penetration tests and all of the things that our hospitals are demanding of us as we store their very private information in our system. So anyone who wanted to talk offline about sort of what those security controls are and how we have things set up, I'm certainly happy to do that.
Wonderful. Yeah, and that goes for anyone who has any questions about privacy. Again, we'll be sending out the information. You can ask additional questions when you get that email as well.
I should mention too that none of our hospitals' data is commingled. So all of our hospitals have their own individual databases where Vigilance is running. So we're not commingling that data. So there's no concern of hospitals' data being mixed together.
Got it, got it. Another question, does the model have a minimum request for patient information? So if you only have a few pieces of information available, how accurate will the predict score be?
That's a great question. And again, this speaks to the black box approach and the collaborative approach where you do customized models. We've seen instances where different clients have different sets of data available. And so suppose you have a model that, incorporates, say, procalcitonin as an input, and it gives great results. Now, the next hospital might not necessarily have access to that data or might not be performing that test. And so those great results may not translate well to the next hospital. And if you just port the same model to the next hospital, it's not going to work well. So, yes, we require a minimum set of inputs for the model to work. I think the fundamental thing is that what are you doing right now? What is your approach? What model are you using? For example, if you're using the SERS model, what we will do is based on the input that you have available, we'll build a model and test it against what your current status quo is. If we are able to improve upon that status quo, then it means that model is worth deploying. So there is certainly a minimum set of data points that are needed. But I think that minimum will be met by most hospitals. First, to start off, if you are going with the standard SERS criteria, we need the 4 constituent inputs, which are the heart rate, temperature, respiratory rate, and white blood cell count. Now, if you even just include age as an additional input, that should bring some more specificity to the model. If you bring in stuff like BMI, bring in other inputs, comorbidities, history, which are all standard inputs or standard parameters that you would be able to obtain from any hospital, you are sure to get a better performing model. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Bart, it looks like we're getting close to the end here, but I've one more question for you. Does the model incorporate the updated step definition statements and guidance for hospitals and practitioners? And could you talk a little bit about those updates?
I hope maybe the questioner is referring to the newest joint, what do you call it? The newest that came from the third consensus meeting, which was published in JAMA in February this year. Now, it's interesting. In that paper, they actually tested 4 different models. There is the LODS, which is the logistic regression model. There was the SOFA, the sequential organ dysfunction assessment model. They also tested a quick SOFA model and then the SERS model. What that came out of that analysis was that the logistic regression model was the best so far as those 4 models were concerned. But then the recommendation was that the Q-SOFA, which is a quick stripped-down version of the SOFA approach or model, should be used. I think the presupposition was that most institutions will not be able to leverage the logistic regression model in their day-to-day care delivery system. Well, this is where Vigilance comes in that we have a platform that can actually take advanced models and bring it straight into your care delivery workflow. And so we watch carefully with all the science that is going on around all our models that we do. We are looking into the literature, we are abreast with the science, and we try to leverage every new information that is out there. And then we try to test our models against the recommended approaches and ensure that we have better performing models. So yes, we do incorporate the new recommendations. We are constantly monitoring it.
Great, great. Adam, just one more question for you. Kind of backing up and looking at this big picture, who exactly are the intended users for this predictive model, and what is the ease of use?
Yeah, well, the end users, there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunity for many people to be the end users of it. It could be sepsis coordinators within the hospital. It could be the physicians. Really anyone who needs to get this information, just because of all the different mechanisms that the platform has for notifying and alerting and embedding workflow into existing applications that for example the physician may already be in, and in the course of their flow they're able to access it. So what we're really trying to do here is make this information available in lots of different ways in order to meet any sort of uses within the hospital.
Great. Wonderful. Well, it looks like we are just about out of time. I wanted to thank both our presenters again today for your excellent presentation, and for all of our audience members who submitted questions. We really appreciate your participation, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars. This concludes today's program. Everyone, have a wonderful afternoon.